how would you like to do a Grand Prix preview for the best racing series in the world, Formula One, on a track that we have next to no data for?
Yeah, it's pretty rough considering there's only been one previous race at this track in F1. Granted, plenty of races in motorcycles, but we're not in the business of motorcycles.
It's going to be tough, but that's exactly what we're doing today with our 2023 Qatar Grand Prix preview.
Welcome to Turn 1, a Formula One podcast. Now entering the grid. Here are your hosts, Thomas and Jeremiah.
Welcome to Turn 1, a Formula One podcast. We are your hosts, Thomas
and Jeremiah.
As we mentioned at the top of the video, we are going to be doing a preview of the 2023 Qatar Grand Prix at the Losail International Circuit. And I watched like 1,000 videos to make sure we're pronouncing that correctly because it seems like such a simple word, but it is the Losail International Circuit. And it's tough because there's really only been, one Grand Prix here before?
Yeah, only one previous race in 2021. That's it.
And outside of that, we can check the history of the MotoGP series or the World Superbike series or the classic 2009 Asia GP2 series. A historic race if there ever was one.
Oh, gosh.
So here's what we'll do. We're going to take you all through a little bit about the track itself, the track layout, some of its defining features. We'll get into a little bit of track history, the history that we were able to find in its short, 19-ish year history. And then we'll get into some fun facts. And of course, we will predict the race with 100% accuracy, just like we do every single race week. Jeremiah, take me through some of the features of this track.
So with only 16 turns, the track does span about 3.4 miles. It's actually 3.367. And for all of our UK fans, 5.419 kilometers. There's only one DRS zone, which kind of bothers me. It's on the main straight, which I understand, but I like to see more DRS just because of the fact that it gives you those options of getting the overtake done. Turns 12, 13, and 14 for me personally seem like the most exciting. Now, granted, since we don't have a lot of experience on this track, I did play it on the game multiple times, so I kind of got somewhat of a feel of the track. Granted, the cars are different and we haven't seen what they've done on this track, so we'll see. But turns 12 and 13 are flat out, and turn 14, there's a slight lift as you go into the straight going into 15. I just think that whole section is going to be sweet.
I'm excited for it. It's an interesting track because much like, I guess the closest comparison would be Bahrain, right? Maybe Abu Dhabi, although Abu Dhabi's been spruced up a little bit with the surrounding areas. There's like zero elevation to the track. You can see the entire track from everywhere on the track.
Now, granted, before the track was there, it was just desert. So there's that.
It is cool. So me and Jeremiah both have this thing where we like to look at stuff on Google Earth or Google Maps, I think. And this one is interesting because it is near Doha, Qatar, which is a relatively big city, but it's out a little ways and it's literally just surrounded by desert. And
not just desert. What else does it have?
Down the street.
Yeah.
So down the street, we were looking around and there was these massive ovals that looked like either like a proving ground for a car manufacturer or some kind of oval racing circuit. And we click on it, International Camel Racing.
Yeah.
And we're like, maybe that's just a brand. Maybe it's Camel cigarettes. And we click on the pictures of the track. Nope. They're racing camels. They're racing camels. So what we're going to do next year is we're going to ask for some of our viewers to pitch in. We would like to go to Qatar, take in the F1 race, and then go down the street and take in some camel racing, or perhaps race a camel ourselves.
Oh my gosh, don't get spit on. Or is that a
I will
llama?
say it's interesting. I would encourage everybody to go take a look at Google Earth, because as we'll get to the fun facts here in just a minute, this track has a lot of lights, and there's a reason why it has a lot of lights. You can see literally all of them from the highway, and it looks like just a massive field of light towers. Okay, let's move on a little bit to fastest lap. This is something that we look at for every track that we preview. What do you have on fastest lap?
So, since there's only been one race in 2021, the fastest lap is from 2021, set by Max Verstappen in his wild race with Lewis Hamilton for the championship. He set a 1 minute 23.1. Now, for reference, like we always do, the Porsche Carrera Cup, 2 flat. So we're looking at over a 30-second difference between your average, or not average, your souped up Porsches versus the Formula One cars.
That's one of the bigger discrepancies that we've seen. And that just shows that this is really going to be possibly a turn heavy track, a lot more lifting coast, maybe.
Aerodynamics is going to play a big part in this once you get off that main straight.
When you were running your sim races earlier, what was your throttle percentage?
Well, if you're not on a straight, you're flat out as you're going into every turn, but there's so many turns that you're just dropping off the throttle, whether it's a lift or slamming on the brakes. And for the most part, that's why I say this is going to be a very aero heavy track. I don't know if they're going to be running high downforce. I mean, low drag, just because I don't think besides this front straight or main straight that you're going to get any of that action. I think all of the action is going to be in the turns.
It'll be interesting to see. And I think the teams so Max Verstappen's time of 123, that's going to go down every single year, right? Barring some major regulation change that slows the cars down, these teams are going to have time to figure out this track over the next 10 years of their agreement. Could we see that tick down into the 10 to 19 range? Could they shave off 4 seconds?
I would like to see it, just because, I mean, if you think about it, all of these tracks, these drivers have been going on for years. And as far as Qatar is concerned, the drivers that were in Formula One in 2021 all got experience with the practice sessions, qualifying, and then the actual race itself. But other than that, they weren't even back last year. So it's not even fresh on anybody's mind.
Well, speaking of people that have run this race before with maybe a little bit more experience than everybody else, I'm going to take you back to kind of the start of Formula One's content at this track, and then Jeremiah will cover the most recent race, the 2009 Qatar GP2 Asia Series round at Losail. This baffles me because obviously we weren't fans of the sport of F1 back then, let alone GP2, which was at the time the kind of the F2 series, but this was specifically the Asia region. You had qualifying, which is normal, then a feature race, and then a sprint race.
I don't know. I mean, if you think about it, every 5 years they do different kinds of changes to kind of play with things to see what might work better, what might get more fans, stuff like that. So I guess the sprint races were after the feature race back then.
Possibly because as it was labeled in the actual race report, race one, it just labeled race one. The feature race is labeled race one. And then the sprint race is labeled race two. And if you're looking at that from a box score standpoint, you're like, those are worth equal value. But then you go look at the points and no, Nico Hülkenberg comes away with a total of 13 points as he got 10 for winning, 2 for something, and 1 for the fastest lap. No idea what the point structure was in GP2 back then. And then Sergio Perez only collects 6 points for winning and 1 point for the fastest lap.
But see, that just goes to show that we're going to have drivers on the track that have winning experience. I mean, obviously Lewis Hamilton won in 2021, but I mean, other than that, Sergio's got winning experience. Nico Hülkenberg is back on the track now in a Haas. Granted, he's not going to be fighting for podiums or wins, but he's going to be able to do more on that track than say a K-Mag or like a Alex Albon or something like that.
This could be another chance for Haas to get back into Q3, which they've been struggling with of late, but they were pretty good early on in the year, at least getting 1 or 2 Haas's into Q3. Now, granted, as soon as the race would start, they would immediately lose position, but still nice to see them get into Q3 nevertheless. Let's bring it up to more real quick before we bring it up to the modern races. I just wanted to run you through the list of other series that run this race, because as we're in the world of F1, the F1 fans might not be as familiar with this track considering it's one running. But if you're into bike racing or the Porsche Cup, you have GP Masters, Moto GP, World Superbike. You have Moto 2, MRF Challenge, the Porsche Carrera Cup, TC1, World SSP, Stock Car Racing, Moto 3, Super Sport 300, Asia Productions 250, and Asia Underbone 130.
I don't know what the last half of those are, except for the stock car, which I can assume is something the equivalency of NASCAR.
They're
But
all
the
bike
motorcycle
racing,
series,
all bike racing except for the stock car and the Porsche.
yeah, which is what this track was pretty much known for at its conception, just going forward. And then they started, I guess, bringing cars to it. But
Yeah,
it's definitely a moto track.
They did stock racing 2009. The winner was Viantonio Luisi.
Yeah, I know who that is.
All right, modern day. How did we do 2 years ago at Losail?
The 2021 Grand Prix. We have the inaugural race. I talked about this in the TikTok short in case any of you happen to see that, but the Australian Grand Prix was set to lead off for the F1 season of 2021. That got canceled due to COVID-19. So as they scrambled to kind of find a replacement for it, they landed on the Qatar Grand Prix. So here's the thing. That did not continue. In 2022, it was canceled due to Qatar hosting the FIFA World Cup. But what we got from that 2021 Grand Prix was a Lewis, Max, and Fernando Alonso podium, which was also Alonso's first podium since 2014 Hungarian Grand Prix. So that was pretty cool. Going forward in 2023 and beyond, they did sign a new contract with the FIA stating that F1 is going to be coming back for the next 10 years. So that's good. That'll stretch to 2033, and we'll see plenty of Qatar action.
How long until all of the races are in the Middle East?
I mean, they have what? Qatar, Abu Dhabi, Saudi Arabia. Is that the only three?
It's
Bahrain.
Baku. No, you said Azerbaijan, didn't you?
No, I didn't say Azerbaijan.
Oh, that's out there.
Jeez. So they got Azerbaijan, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Abu Dhabi. That's 5 tracks
of the 23 scheduled races.
I mean, to be fair, America's got Las Vegas, Miami, and
so
Austin.
in 10 years, it's just going to be all the Middle East and Vegas.
Yeah.
Man, all right. Well, there's another episode to be had there about sports washing, which the PGA Tour ran into, but we have yet to cover that as it's a pretty in-depth topic coming out of the Middle East. Let's move into fun facts. Let's start with the championship race. What are we looking at as far as championship implications this weekend?
So going into this weekend, Max Verstappen only needs 3 points to seal the deal, which granted, since it's a sprint weekend, by the way, he'll probably get during the sprint race on Saturday, which that's kind of boring. But nonetheless, he'll win the championship either during the sprint race or the feature race. They can pretty much lock that down. There's no chance of Sergio catching up at this point. But I mean, I don't think there ever was. I think it was a guarantee Max at some point was going to get it.
It's really crazy when we look back to the very start of the season. I can't remember what our first round of predictions were, but remember how concerned we were about Sergio holding on to that number 2 spot over Fernando Alonso at the time?
Yeah.
Boy, I mean, how things have changed.
We expected a bigger fight from Ferrari. I know that just because of what happened in 2022 between Charles and Max going at it all season. But they pretty much ran away with it, and well, Max did. Sergio just been kind of hanging on.
It's really helped Sergio that Ferrari, well, it helped them first that Aston Martin had kind of the first half of the season getting points. And then the second half of the season, Ferrari, McLaren, and Mercedes have been stealing points from each other.
That's true. I think it's also helping Sergio the fact that he's also in the fastest car on the grid because while his skills might not be on par with like a Charles Leclerc, Lewis Hamilton, Max Verstappen, that car pretty much evens out the rest of it, considering everybody else's car is garbage in comparison to the Red Bull.
Okay, let's move on into miscellaneous fun facts. We've already mentioned the 10-year deal going to 2033. What is the WEC?
So the World Endurance Championship, when you see stuff like the 24 hours of Le Mans and all those races where it's 8 hours of this, 16 hours of that, those are your endurance races. What's cool about this is that Losail is set to host the WEC going forward starting in 2024, which means it'll be one of the select few tracks that has an F1 GP, a Moto GP, and now a WEC race. So it's going to have the 3, what I would assume is the pinnacles of motorsport. It's going to host all 3 of them.
They've got to host that in the winter, right? Because as I look up current weather for Doha, Qatar, they had a high today of 106 degrees Fahrenheit.
Well, I doubt it's going to be the 24 hours of Qatar. It's probably going to be like an 8 or 16-hour race. I highly doubt that they're
In
going to
the
go
middle of
24
August.
hours. Yeah, because they're going to have massive swings of temperature out there.
Going to go from 110 down to 70.
That's what
Tires
I'm
are
saying. It's
exploding.
just you have full on sun and desert heat. And then when that sun goes down, it's just freezing.
At the time of this track being built, we mentioned it kind of a little bit earlier in the no elevation changes, but this is the largest outdoor lighting racing structure at the time, right? It's been passed since, but at the time.
Yeah, it's the biggest permanent sports structure lighting. I guess you would call it like lighting system. But anyway, a permanent sports venue and all of the lights that they have surrounding it. At the time, it was the biggest. Now that's since been passed by Abu Dhabi as the Yas Marina Circuit. If you look at it, it's just light after light after light. And they're like 5 feet away from each light. I mean, it's crazy.
There's so many light, and then there's like hotels that light up, and there's TV screens.
Oh yeah, it's so lit up.
There's Ferrari World right next door. It did also host the first night race for MotoGP, which if you were going to ask me to like bet money on when the first night race in MotoGP was, I would have told you like the 70s or 80s. No, 2008.
Well, I mean, think about how expensive it must be to build massive light structures that cover an entire track. Now, remember, this is a 3.4-mile track, completely lit up in lights.
And not like highway lights, like enough to be televised lights.
Oh, yeah. I mean, these drivers have to be able to see every crack, every grain of sand, everything on this track, which, by the way, another little fun fact for you, the outskirts of the track is covered in grass so that the sand can't get onto the track.
Interesting. Did not know that.
Yeah.
I'm going to quick hit these next two. It is a sprint weekend, which we've talked about. We're still on the bubble about how we feel about sprints. We'll get more used to them, I'm sure, in the next couple of seasons, but they're still weird. And then old Liam Lawson gets one more go in that AlphaTauri.
Oh, yeah. I'm excited for that.
Okay, what do you have as far as Mercedes bringing upgrades?
So I don't have much just because they're being very hush hush about it. Obviously, I said potential upgrades for this just because the article that I was reading said that Mercedes is expected to be bringing upgrades sometime in these next couple races, and then they're immediately going to start switching to the W15 production. But the reason that they're bringing these upgrades to the W14 instead of just immediately switching to the W15 is they feel like they can learn more from the car that will transition to knowledge and the building of the W15. So they're trying to get more parts out there to see how they respond, to see if it's something that's worth converting for next year's car, which I think is pretty sweet.
It is kind of late in the season to be doing major upgrades, especially if you've kind of got your footing in the current car. But if those upgrades are to support your next round of car building, then it makes sense. The only tricky part is fitting them into the regulations for both years, because that's why teams sometimes do completely separate car builds. Like one car doesn't carry over to the other because the regulations change just enough to where your previous build doesn't fit.
Which I'm sure that they've already taken into consideration what the rules and regulations are going to be for next year. So essentially they're getting free early testing, which I think is genius.
It is. My last fun note for this track is that we talked about the Camel Racing. But one of our favorite things that we wish COTA would have down in Austin so we could experience it. They kind of have it, but it's not the exact same. They have a go-kart track outside the Losail circuit that is kind of built in the same exact shape of that circuit, which is cool.
I feel like they should all be. If you're going to have a go-kart track on the outskirts of an F1 track, make it exactly to the specific inches, feet, whatever, of what the actual track is. I want it to be a sized down replica of the F1 track that I get to watch these drivers go around, because that would be awesome. And ideally that would have been perfect. I don't know why everybody doesn't do that. And I'm glad Losail does that.
Again, we gotta get some fan support to get out to Qatar next year.
Yeah, we could watch the F1 race, do some karting around the track, go check out the camels.
We wear full on camel gear too, like the yellow and blue.
Yes. Smoking Camel cigarettes.
All right, let's move into probably the most difficult part of previewing any race. What do we think is going to happen prediction wise, and who are our three going on the podiums this weekend? Kick us off.
I'll get into what I expect from the race a little bit later, probably after this. But as far as my podium, I mean, I'm going to assume Max Verstappen is going to run away with this. With McLaren being as dominant as they were last year, I don't see the Mercedes upgrades beating that. I feel like they might match it, and then it's a race of skill. I'm going to put Norris at number 2, but because of those Mercedes upgrades, if they do come, or just because of Hamilton's pace in general, I'm putting Hamilton on the 3rd spot. Now, a lot of people talked about the possibilities of this being, with the fact that it's a sprint race, they're only getting one practice session. Sorry. There is a possibility that this could be another Singapore for Red Bull, where there's just not enough time to get the car in the specs that they need for the race, and it could cause them to struggle during the actual race. I don't see that as a high possibility, but nonetheless, I assume it is a possibility.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but this year's format of the sprint races is still practice, quali, sprint, quali, race.
You know, I would love to correct you if you're wrong, but I'm gonna have to do some research while you talk
Because
about what your predictions
it used
are.
to be that the sprint race was the qualifying, which I actually liked more than this format of having 2 qualifying sessions that are completely independent of one another.
Yeah, and with the addition of that sprint shootout that decides what the sprint positions are, I'm pretty sure with that being a whole other event, it takes away from the possibility of having a second practice session. So
I figured it out. Sorry.
I'm looking it up.
Practice, race qualifying, sprint qualifying, sprint race, race. That's why I hate it, because it's dumb.
Oh, geez. Yeah, I see that now. Yeah, they're only going to get one practice session to put the car in perfect specs for what the driver needs. That's why people are saying this could be another Singapore for Red Bull.
If anything, have the sprint qualifying before the race qualifying so that the drivers can have more data for the race qualifying, which is what matters.
Yeah, and then I'm still kind of lost in the whole where's Parfirme start, because if Parfirme starts in qualifying, then that means they have practice 1 to set up the car, and then it's locked in for qualifying, sprint shootout, sprint, and then the feature race. So basically at the end of Friday, the car is done being set up. Like,
for a race on Sunday. Yeah, I don't understand. Okay, here's my podium getters. I am going to branch out a little bit. I am not going to put Max Verstappen 3rd like I did for the last race, because that was a mistake.
Good.
I'm going to go with the number 3 spot. Give me Charles Leclerc in that Ferrari to tear it up.
Jeez.
At the Qatar Grand Prix. Number 2, Sergio Perez. He's going to go back to his 2009 roots, okay? He's going to be sitting on that starting grid saying, I remember the 2009 Asia GP2 series. I was there with Nico Hulkenberg, who's 8 grid places behind me. We're about to tear this thing up. And then for my number 1 spot, give me Max Verstappen.
I would hope so.
But you thought I was going to throw out a K-Mag or something?
Well, I mean, if you're putting Sergio at 2nd and Charles at 3rd, I'm changing my 3rd from Hamilton to Hulkenberg. I mean, just
it's okay. Look, so the Sergio thing, the Charles thing is mainly just every once in a while Ferrari just kind of figures it out, and I feel like it's about time for them to figure it out and get it in a podium. And we've seen Charles have these, I don't know, just flashes of being better than Carlos and being worse than Carlos. It could be either one of them, but I'll give it to Charles. Sergio, it's mainly just that as we approach this last little half of the season, I think Red Bull's going to try to run up the score, and they're going to have Sergio fully dialed in. They're going to have Verstappen fully dialed in. No more Sergio getting 5th or starting in 13th. No, it's going to be 1-2 for the rest of the year out of those guys.
I will say to that, if Sergio does get a good qualifying and doesn't go out in Q1, then I could see it definitely happening, because he's already got a fast car, and we've seen any time that he qualifies outside of anything but 2nd, he moves up during the race. So as long as he makes it to Q3, maybe even, I don't even know if I could give him the 2nd spot if he starts in 10th. If he starts in, I'd say like 7th or 6th, then I'd give him the 2nd spot. But he just, as much pace as that car has, he just can't unlock the same pace that Verstappen has. So I just don't see these massive gaps that Verstappen's able to make.
as long as it's not another recovery drive. So he got second 3 race weekends ago at Monza. He got second in Belgium, second in Miami, and second in Bahrain. So he can do it, and he's done it recently, so it's possible.
He's the minister of recovery.
What a great title. Like being most improved. Okay, what do you expect out of the race weekend outside of the podium? Where's your maybe possible winners going to be at?
I expect a return for Alex Albon. I want to see him getting some good points. Now, when I say good, he's obviously not going to get 4th or 5th, but if he happens to get 7th, 8th, I think I'm going to consider that good points. Another one, I want to guarantee this, but I really can't. I'm going to say points for AlphaTauri. Now, I'm not saying, notice for Albon, I said Alex Albon earlier, but for this one, I'm saying AlphaTauri. And that's because we've seen Tsunoda get points in the past. We've seen Leon Lawson get points in the past. So I think it could go to either one, but I think AlphaTauri just has more pace than those Alfa Romeos, than maybe that of Haas, that of the other Williams driver. Another thing I would like to see for my final point here, I'd like to see Logan Sargent finish this race and go an entire weekend without slapping a wall. Because I really feel for these Williams engineers. I really do.
They're just putting in so many hours for the lowest pay on the grid.
When we saw this last feature race and he slapped a wall, might have been the race, maybe it was qualifying. I think it was qualifying. He slaps a wall, and I just watched all of the engineers just drop their head into their hands, and they were just freaking out about the fact that they're about to work the next 24 hours. I'm starting to feel for them, and I know those pockets are starting to get tight.
Okay, I have 4 predictions for you. Or 4, what do I expect?
Okay.
1, Max Verstappen's going to win the championship. There's number 1.
That's a given.
Number 2, Red Bull is going to retain the Constructors' Championship. No one's going to steal it from them at this race.
Didn't they clinch it last race?
Yes, but somebody could physically come and steal their trophy, and I don't think that that's going to happen.
What?
It's a guarantee. Okay, that one's locked in. No one can take that away from me.
Okay.
My serious predictions, though, number 3 and 4. Give me a double points finish for the AlphaTauris. Give me Lawson and Tsunoda securing points, and I bet Lawson's ahead of Yuki because he almost always is.
I like it.
And give me a 0 points finish for France and the Alpines.
Oh no!
I'm sorry, you're getting replaced with the AlphaTauris this week.
Are we talking DNF or just on merit?
Give me on merit. I don't think we're going to have a lot of DNFs in this. It's a wide open track. I don't think there's going to be a lot of collisions or anything. Maybe some mechanical failures, but I don't think crashing wise we'll get a DNF. So on merit, they're just not going to race well because they're Alpine.
I see it. I can see it happening.
Okay, let us know in the comments how you think the podium will shake out for the race. And what do you think about sprint race weekends? Fan or no fan? Let us know.
Guys, if you think that Logan Sargent is going to triumph and come in 7th place, I'm on your side and I'm here. I want to see it happen.
That's what America strives for, 7th place. All right, we'll see you guys.
Bye, guys.